Hello everybody, welcome back to Master. Hope you're all having an amazing day. We are here going over game 4 from the Congress that I played in the open section. We're starting to get to some of the more reasonable games. The last 3 have been a bit brutal to watch and to play by that as well. So this one was very interesting actually, against a 21-19 very, very strong player. I've played him before in a few rapid games. I've had some good games against him, but he is remarkably strong. So, I am here with the white pieces. Only a short game, by the way. 20 moves. I'll check the accuracy now. I went and got a 90.6 versus his 90.7. So that might give you a clue about how the game ended. But there is a lot to talk about anyway. So, we started off with the King's Indian, like we do. Now, this was less of a mainstream King's Indian attack and more of a reversed King's Indian defense, if that makes sense. Very confusing stuff. But hey, it is what it is. So we sort of go with our regular plan of King's Indian, of going e5, knight c3 probably first if we can. The only difference is we don't usually go for this bishop g5 and then takes f6 idea. That we would get in the King's Indian defense, because we are up a tempo, so we're better off playing around the center than going for this kingside attack. So that, I think, is the main difference between the two. And then we go into like a reverse same-ish, which I have not prepped at all, which is great. So I was a bit scared, but I don't see why we can't do our main line same-ish prep here that we have for black, right? Because we play this as black, as if it was a King's Indian defense. Against the same-ish, we just play e4, right? So I don't see why we can't do that in this situation. After all, we're up a tempo. So we go for it, which apparently is inaccuracy. C4. Apparently the best way to play it. And I can see that. You know, you've got a nice bishop here. With takes, I can also sort of see this as well, because they don't have this d4 square. You can always play e3. But then the question is, I guess, where is your dark squared bishop going, right? Because it can't ever really go on this diagonal. It doesn't really look too healthy over here. So where is it going? Maybe you trade it off for the knight. I don't know. If you play like b3 or something and trade it off for the knight if it goes on d4. But luckily, well, I guess not luckily, we played e4, which is the wrong move. But I don't mind it, right? Because we get the same thing, but we have this sort of square for our bishop here once we play c3. And the knight can sort of come in wherever it wants, really. And we get good control over the open file after they trade queens. By the way, they can't really avoid this unless they do something like, I guess bishop d6 could work. But then you're just sort of giving me free reign, right? And if you play something else, like a developing move, let's say b6 to try fianchetto, which doesn't look ideal, to be honest, I'm going to take, and you're not going to be able to castle. Unless you take back with the knight. But then every single piece is on the back rank, right? So I don't think that's a very good look. Anyway, they go bishop g4, which I think is very natural, pinning the knight against my rook. And the major thing they're threatening here is knight d4, which is bothersome for me. But luckily, like I said, we have this c3 idea of completely plugging their outposts. And it's kind of annoying, actually, for black. This bishop's still doing okay. But it can get kicked out pretty easily. I'm not too bothered, I don't think, about playing g4 as well if I absolutely have to. But I think h3 should do the trick. Or we could just move the rook. Like if we manage to get the rook somewhere moved up, probably not there actually, but get doubled up and then infiltrate, and then we can free up the knight right from the pin. They decide to go knight e7, which is apparently an accuracy. I don't really see what's wrong with it, because you've got to develop it, right? Maybe like knight h6, or I considered actually rook d8 here as well, which the computer is saying is the best move. and you take the hit of not being able to castle, but with only one rook on the board, you're not too scared about infiltrating, about me infiltrating your sort of half of the board, right? So I don't think this is too bad. You've got a bad bishop here. Maybe you can get away with playing c4. But then, you know, I've got some pretty clear targets with knight on a3, so maybe trading off, but then I've got the bishop pair. I don't really know, but yeah, I don't think blocking in your pieces is particularly the right thing to do, because I have this idea of knight a3. Now, knight a3 is quite a flexible move, and you'll see this a lot in the Alapin against the Sicilian, with this sort of pawn structure of e4 and c3. It's quite nice. Like, it looks weird. You're always told to not bring your knights to the side of the board because they have limited squares. But in this case, it actually works quite well. Firstly, and you'll see this a lot in the Alpine, is knight c2 is a nice way of developing your knight. It covers these holes if you've not covered them already. And if you've still got the d pawn, it's supporting a d4 break as well. It also has the opportunity to go to e3 and then subsequently d5 and f5 as well, which are quite big holes for their position. It can also go to c4 if you want, which is sort of similar. I don't like this option as much because you can get kicked out with b5. But if they have nothing covering the d6 square, then that's just good. And then that's also a bit flexible as well because you can still go to e3. My favorite idea is knight b5 though. Threatening everything. Literally everything. So dangerous for black. Yes, there is potential for our knight to get kicked out straight away, but hopefully we are threatening enough things that it shouldn't make a difference. So this is very scary. And if you go a6, I'm just going to resort to like knight c4 or knight c2 as well. Either one I think works. Knight c4 looks a tiny bit more active because they're not controlling d6 with the knight blocking in the bishop. So I'd probably go with that. The point is, you can't really stop this. Like, this knight is going to be dangerous regardless. So you just got to deal with it. Which is why I think another reason rook d8 works quite well, because then you're not walking into any threats of being forked, right? So, what do they go here? They drop the knight back to c8, which is a strange way to defend, I think, but surface level I think works. I didn't see a problem with it. The computer calls it an inaccuracy at plus 1.9, I think it's saying. 1.1 on the bar, but 1.09 if I can read. And the point is, you're defending d6, you're freeing up your bishop, and then you can castle. And ideally, you would castle as quickly as possible, I think. And you're also sort of controlling a7 as well, which is one of my targets, but I'm not really threatening because you've already got this knight covering that as well. Anyway, I've still got c7 up for grabs, so knight b5 sort of forces rook b8, and then with the knights covering a7 as well, that's not the end of the world. But I check anyway, because why not, right? The king can't castle. I think the best move is to go to king f7, which is what they did. Very awkward for me to hit the king here. If you go up, that does not look great, I will say. The computer wants a4. I think maybe you have something a bit cooler. Knight e5 maybe, and you've just got your knight on the outpost. Could potentially work, but the king just goes back to f7, right? And not much is happening there. So, I don't know. Maybe king e7. I guess at worst you're blocking in your dark squared bishop. So there's just no point, right? Just go f7. And then if I do manage to get another check, say I play like h3, try kick the bishop, because the bishop can't really go to any of these squares. But you could go here, but then you're giving me the bishop pair, right, after takes. So that's not ideal. So you go back, and then maybe I've got rook d7 you block. I don't think this is the end of the world for black. Maybe I've got knight d5 here and just hit this again, but yeah, maybe even king e6 at that point looks cool. Apparently a miss. Rook c7. Rook c7. King e8. King e8 apparently. And you hit the rook. Wow. Because I guess the bishop is just defended, right? And you don't even have time to pick up the bishop pair because your rook is under attack by the king. Anyway, that didn't happen. They go to f7, which is the incredibly sensible move. And then h3. Now, I thought bishop takes here was good. I don't think the computer wants bishop to e6, and you just play without the bishop pair, which is a computery thing to do, and that evaluates that at 1.22, 1.4 even. So it's not ideal. I think taking gives a good chance because, yes, I've got the bishop pair, but there's also a good chance it could end in an opposite coloured bishop endgame, which I think black could probably get away with a draw in this situation. You know, it's not an ideal situation. It's not bad, right? But you're just slightly underdeveloped, and I have some very nice squares in my control. I thought here maybe I could ignore this for a second and just go check, which looks interesting. Bishop e6, e7 again, I think is relatively safe. Maybe I can go bishop f1. It's crazy. And just look for this check. But I don't think that does quite work because you are down a piece. So you probably just take. And then you can maybe get this rook in somewhere. Rook d8 is saying, because the bishop and the knight still control that as well. So you're just liquidating at that point, and it's roughly even. The computer is saying at 0.075. So interesting lines. You can have a look at that yourself. But yeah, they took, we took, and then bishop d6. I think is a really nice move. You're asking a question about what I'm doing with my knight. I considered knight b5 again. That seemed a bit backwards though. Because they have something like rook d8 and then they're contesting the open file quite nicely. And then something like a6 as well would just kick the knight back straight away. So I think knight d5, sensible. Apparently bishop e3 works, and the reason is because if they take, then you have check again, and they can maybe move one of the knights, but you just take the bishop. And then you've got the bishop pair well and truly. And it's saying, although even material, it's plus 2.2, which is insane. This is hanging. If this moves, this isn't quite hanging because the knight does cover. But you do have to maybe save this. Otherwise, I think I'm infiltrating with rook d1. Maybe I have ideas of bishop e2 with bishop c4 as well, looking for some checks. Could be quite nice. But I think it's all about activity, really. I think, especially with the bishop pair, there are some open lines, and my rooks are doing some good work, I think. So I'm guessing that's why it's evaluating it so high, even though it's even material. So we go knight d5 instead and sort of plug this hole. And rook d8, I think, is a good move. You can also consider knight e7, which I think they play at some point. But rook d8 is just looking to contest the open file. But the good thing about this knight is it is an outpost defended by the pawn and the rook and the bishop for that as well. So it can't really go anywhere, and it's sort of just like a permanent thorn in black's position, really. Bishop e3, looking to sort of prod at this c5 pawn, also just connect the rooks as well. So if the bishop goes anywhere, we have like takes and then takes, right? It sort of keeps this bishop here for now until they play something like b6. Knight e7, I think, is a good way of kicking out this knight. And here, the computer... Oh, no, yeah, bishop e2, I like. threatening c4 with like some discovered check, maybe. I don't know quite what you can do. But yeah. And here knight takes d5 is what I calculated. I thought this was the best move. Apparently b6 and you just play it a bit slower. I guess to avoid this c5 pawn hanging, probably. But then you're allowing things like bishop c4. And I don't know how nice that is to play as black. It looks a bit awkward. King e8, it's saying. And then you just trade off, I think. And then maybe even plug the hole on d5. It's wanting bishop b5 check, actually. Wow. And then you just double up and dominate the open file, I guess is the play, right? So they took. That's not great for them, but I did not understand the reason why. I thought having the pass pawn would be more valuable. I was wrong, as per usual. Having the pass pawn looks nice until you realize, hang on a second, I can't actually do anything with this pass pawn, like at all. There's also considering c4 as a move as well, bishop c4, pinning. But I think it's saying knight e7 and you just defend again, and you're left in a similar sort of position. But there is potentially the move b5 to worry about. A4, it's saying bishop takes, knight takes, and you just take with the rook. I can see white having a slight advantage here. I don't really know what the difference is. I guess you've not got the bishop pair right anymore. But anyway, I took back with the pawn because I thought the pass pawn looked nice. But in reality, I completely didn't realize that you can't actually do anything with the pass pawn because the bishop just sits on d6 and there's no open files anymore to infiltrate with your rooks. And the position's quite close, which doesn't help the bishop pair, which is great. They go knight e7. Very natural. Hitting this, threatening bishop c7, I guess, and trying to win this pawn. So I go c4. Apparently an inaccuracy as well. a4 again it wants, which is crazy. I guess there's no rush to defend this right now, which makes sense. So a4 prevents any future b5 breaks, I guess. But anyway, I rush with c4. I'm thinking I have a slight advantage here, but honestly, against this player, like a 21-19, I'd take a draw. I'll take a draw. And then knight f5 is actually quite a tricky move. And this gives a slight advantage to black for the first time in the game. The problem is, I can't really save this bishop. I can't allow their knight to get to d4 because that's a mega outpost. And I've got nothing that can kick it out, no pawns. And if I take with one bishop, they're just going to replace it with the pawn and it's still in the pawn chain. So yeah, I can't really move the bishop. So I'm losing the bishop pair. Not only that, but after knight takes, it's going to be opposite coloured bishops, which is draw written all over it, right? It's a mega draw. So I think, yes, I played bishop g4. No, that's the best computer move. I played bishop g4. The idea, maybe I can get a check and then my bishop does something, but in reality, there's nothing that can be done in this situation. In fact, it's black really with the play. And after knight takes e3, he offered me a draw and I accepted. I was happy. I got some points in this open section. But yeah, it was interesting. And we can actually play through this a bit more and see. So I throw in the check. And then maybe like king e8 or king f8. I don't know which one's better. King e7, apparently playable still. But the problem is, not only do they have b5 breaks, which is quite annoying for me, they also have this idea of e4, which I can't really hit at all, right? I would have to come to d4. Well, I could go there, I guess. But But then I guess this is hanging, right? So if I go like bishop f5 here, what's the plan? g6? And after takes, maybe just f5? Oh, bishop takes g3. Okay. And this is backwards, I guess. Bishop f3. And then king f7. And you just try to hit this backwards e-pawn. Because I guess this bishop can sit here, right, as well. So their opposite bishop is slightly better than ours in this situation. I also calculated b5 could be a slight annoyance, right? So if I take, I think this d pawn's super weak. And if I go b3, they're going to take, and then they get the rooks infiltrating, which isn't the end of the world, but is definitely like not a situation I want to be in at all. Like at all. Rook takes, and then maybe they just take the open file and they try to like infiltrate this way. The computer calls it even, but I would be very scared as white here, I think. But yeah, you can see how black slightly has more play in this situation, but I think practically there's a very good drawing chances with the opposite bishops, especially with this pass pawn. You know, if you try too hard to make something out of it, and you trade off the rooks, the bishop gets distracted. Maybe this could run at some point, but yeah. I think I was shocked really to find out how nice the play for black actually is in this situation, but yeah, I took the draw. The draw I think was a good call. I think it was a good call. I'm disappointed that I didn't take back with the rook here, which was the best move. And yes, you do get kicked out, but at the end of the day, you have the open file. And there's nothing really that they can do about it. And then you're going to take the c-pawn, and then it's nice. It's really nice. And then the bishop comes on c4. I would say this is almost dominating, right? But it's a lesson learned not to overvalue passed pawns, especially when they can be blockaded quite well. Anyway, that was my first half point in the Open tournament. We'll go over the one win I got next time, which was a long game, but like short at the same time, which is weird, but had a quite fun ending. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like if you liked. Please subscribe if you really liked, and I'll catch you guys all later. Bye-bye.